Hello YouTube, I'm back with another Excalibur build, and this video will serve two purposes. The sort of primary purpose of this is I'll demonstrate the most important aspects of modding out Excalibur. There's only really a few very specific things that are the most important. If, let's say, you're someone that hasn't played for 12 years that has nearly infinite resources and all the mods and all that. So if you're starting out, even if you're starting out at like MR2, and I'll show you how I'm accomplishing that, which gets into the second purpose of it, which is to show the base Excalibur, practically no Forma, and then also no Prime mods. And being for the reason, if anyone's traded Prime mods before and doesn't have that many credits, there are a million credits just to trade them. So that's where creating a build and showing, hey, this is actually Steel Path viable based on these other things, the most important parts about modding out Excalibur. So what I'll do first is sort of recap about what the... And I'm using my Influence build specifically. I won't show my Affliction. The only changes I've kind of made to Affliction is that if you run... You can run Nourish just fine. And if you run Nourish, just run an Adarza Kavat to get Cat's Eye. Because then that at least puts you at yellow crits. Seems to have a good benefit. And when you're running Nourish, you don't really need Charm's extra energy. But if you're running Wrathful Advance, just run Smita, because Charm is still one of the most powerful companion abilities in the game. Even though they remove the double drop from it, the other buffs from it are very good. Especially after they fixed the crit chance. The fact that it used to break your crit chance if it was above 200%. So this is the same thing here, energy effectiveness, orbs, and then melee crit damage. And then on my Wrathful Advance, if you were, let's say, downgrading on some of these builds, I've been able to, even testing this at level cap, sort of experimentally determine you need two of three things. You need at least 300% strength, or Wrathful Advance, or Furious Javelin. So out of those three things, like let's say in this build, you've got Furious Javelin and you got Wrathful Advance. So I can run perfectly fine at 200% strength. And your second Arcane in these sorts of builds, especially the Chromatic Influence build, this kind of doesn't matter. If you wanted to run Augmented because you wanted more strength, it probably scales better. But for most missions, the vast majority of missions, Arcane Fury is going to just outperform it from the simple fact that you're not getting 250 kills in most missions. So this is a good option. This is a cheap option. So is Molt Augmented because of where it comes from, but just as an option, you can, whatever you happen to have, that's a variation of there. And showing Exalted Blade, whether you run Sacrificial Pressures and Sacrificial Steel as a set, or you run Condition Overload and the Galvanized Steel, it really doesn't matter. I'm showing, and I've been running the Sacrificial set for two reasons. Condition Overload doesn't apply to Slash Dash at all. It'll apply when you have like Exalted Blade out and to the waves that happen from Slash Dashing with Exalted Blade out, but the actual damage from Exalted Blade, it doesn't affect it. So that was like a prior Tech Red Encore thing, like, hey, Condition Overload doesn't apply to pseudo Exalteds. I don't know about the rest of them, but I tested it. Condition Overload doesn't apply to Slash Dash, and it might be the weird way that Slash Dash works that I've discussed in pretty good detail in my other videos. So that's an option that you have. If you had to choose, let's just say, since we're talking about it here, elemental damage scales really well. Like if you didn't have, let's say, some of these other mods, like I believe this one's pretty expensive for the most part, so you could just throw Shocking Touch in there instead if you, let's say, didn't have that mod yet. You really want to have the status damage. So the Galvanized mods in general from melee are really good. All of them. Really the most useful out of all of them, if I had to say, is actually Galvanized Reflex, because this changes. It's required in some builds where the other ones are sort of like a, they're slightly better, but they're nowhere near as powerful as this is. Prime Fury. If you don't have Prime Fury, then, and I'll show this with the Excalibur build, I don't like this mod because if you notice, it's on melee kill. That reduced attack speed really hurts when you run into like a boss and there's no enemies around, and all of a sudden you're attacking at base speed for Exalted Blade, which is not very high. It's quite obnoxious. So as a replacement for that, Quickening, which is, I believe, a cheap mod. I won't reference prices for any market value stuff because that's always changing. I don't really deal in the small mods and like small sales like this, so I don't really know the pricing that well on how cheap these get, but your results may vary depending on the market conditions. Just don't use trade chat, please. Don't use trade chat. It's not worth it. Focus school. Focus school kind of doesn't matter when you're scaling it down, but if you can do it, use Naraman, and that brings us into Umbra. The only change I've made to Umbra since my most recent build guide is, and I've shown this in other videos, use maximum energy versus 2 violet shards. And the reason you're doing that is because of the way his Sentience mode, the way that its energy works. So if you give it starting energy, and you can do that with preparation, with mod capacity, remaining mod capacity, and with Amber Archon shards. If you use one of these, it like dramatically reduces the probability of the problem that the sentient form of Umbra can run into, which is where he drains all his energy. And if you have the Exalted Blade out and he drains all his energy casting Wrathful Advance and Slash Dash and Radio Javelin, then all of a sudden it's not that he decasts Exalted Blade, it's that he runs out of energy and it decasts from a lack of energy. And so here, practically the same build, but I'm using Molt Augmented in this. This is what I've been running very recently. I've been playing Umbra pretty much exclusively, and it works. This second arcane is really not that important, so it really depends on what you like. If you like Arcane Strike in there and you don't want to mod both your weapons for attack speed, then that kind of frees some things up. So that's another option. That's where some flexibility exists. If you don't have Prime Sure-Footed, this is where you get into the build of the day. After I at least show you this, same thing. Can use Condition Overload, Galvanized Steel as you need to. Where we get into the question at hand and the topic at hand, which is how low can you go on Excalibur and still be Steel Path viable? Now, this build kind of doesn't make a lot of sense because if you're in Steel Path, then you have Umbra. And if you have Umbra, you might as well use the Umbra mods because he comes with polarity. You can pretty much build him out with maybe 1 Forma, 2 Forma. It's been so long, I don't know. It's been years since I did that quest and had a base Excalibur Umbra. But I did relatively recently get this base Excalibur and only polarize him a couple of times in order to fit a full non-prime mod build. Some mods that are easy to trade because they're only 4,000 credit tax. So then, you know, if you have enough credits baseline, then you can just jump right into it. Notice I don't have any Archon shards and I don't have a companion equipped. And I'm doing that intentionally. You could use whatever companion. I'm just showing for demonstration purposes. There's nothing. I'm not using like a Sentinel that's just giving me infinite, like infinite shields or something in this demonstration. So we'll go down the line here and show this. So I polarized him once, and if I remember what I polarized was the aura slot in order to use Brief Respite. And there's a reason for that, because one of the main ways that you can survive as Excalibur, whether that's a full health tank build using triple Umbral mods, or whether that's using like adaptation with no other ways of buffing anything. You know, we're talking in this build, there's no corrupted mods, there's no prime mods. If you had to drop in a corrupted mod, I think it would break the ability for this build to work just based on starting energy or the amount of energy that you get, not using prime flow. But just to show this, if you, let's say, didn't want to polarize him, you would still be able to fit it with a rank 1 or rank 2 or whatever adaptation. I don't have one. I don't have a spare. I usually get rid of them. When I do get them, I usually train them to clanmates. So I don't have a rank 0 to throw in this build to have done a no forma version of it. So if you did, just run a low rank of this and you should be able to fit this. And Arcane Energize, very cheap nowadays. Arcane Fury, pretty cheap from when I was last looking at the market. And then Augur mods and 1 augment. I don't run Furious Javelin in this build. If you did, then you could probably get rid of like Augur Message or Augur Secret, whichever one you were able to get easier. And then you could run Furious Javelin augment. But the downside of this is the cost and the energy economy. I don't run it for a reason because it's not necessary. So this is really taking things down. So even my own 3 requirements that I had mentioned, those 3 requirements are primarily based around level cap, like what is viable at level cap. Turns out the requirement for that's a lot lower when you're only using baseline steel path, or even anyone that would actually be running this build, which is like your MR2 or MR3, and you haven't gotten to Umbra. You haven't gotten to the quest line to get Umbra. So showing through that, I'll show the Exalted Blade. And now before anyone cries, well, those are galvanized mods. These are only 4,000 credits to trade. So these are pretty cheap, and you can buy a max rank just like all of these other mods and not run into problems with running out of credits. You know, a lot of us that have played the game for a very long time just run into the thing where you don't even have to play the game. You don't have to like farm credits. You just play the game and you can get nearly infinite amount of credits. And in this case, this build, I'll actually go back to this to really talk about this. So this might come up as a question. So Precision Intensify, technically this does buff slash dash because, and I tested this fully, because Exalted Blade is what scales slash dash damage. So when you use something like a Precision Intensify, this is a very good mod on Excalibur for a build like this, where you don't have a subsume, you're not using Furious Javelin, so you don't care about the way this scales, and you only really care about Exalted Blade. Because your slash dash is very powerful then too. And going back to Exalted Blade, I'm using Condition Overload here, Galvanized Steel, sure. I did polarize it twice, which if you had to chop some things out, you would probably chop out like Galvanized Reflex. This is more of a quality of life thing. It's not really necessary. You could get rid of these mods and be just fine. So that's where I would tier it. Notice Quickening, Voltaic Strike. If you didn't have Voltaic Strike, then you could get, or if it was too expensive, you can get this one. This is a very good mod. I would say if you wanted to lower the cost of this, I believe that's what I was doing to demonstrate it. So if you didn't have like one extra form on there, you would be able to mostly fit this depending on Blood Rush, depending on Condition Overload. Condition Overload not really required in this. If you run just like Pressure Point, then you could. And you're talking about the non-prime version. You know, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. 120 melee damage, that's pretty good. If you wanted to chop down the not have to polarize it twice. I wanted to at least fill out the mod slot to really stretch to see how well this did. It helps that when you polarize Exalted Blade, it doesn't affect your ability to mod it, or your ability to mod like Excalibur and baseline, that sort of stuff. So then it's relatively easy to, it's more, I would say it's easier to polarize Exalted Blade than it is to polarize Excalibur if you were like trying to use it in a mission. I'll show this. This is a fun build. It's like, I test a lot of melee stuff. This is an interesting one. So I've never polarized my Dex Nikana for one reason, in that I've noticed a lot of people just get this for free. And so this is probably something that a new player has. And notice how I've been able to fit this build without any prime mods with some of the existing mods that I was just showing. And then this is very powerful. It's surprising how powerful. And the reason why is because between Corrupt Charge and Galvanized Steel, or Galvanized Reflex, I mean, you get enough initial combo to where you're basically able to sit at max combo multiplier for this at 11x. So like the 11 by 110 that it gets to, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool feature. So it's a really good heavy attack spam build for a brand new player. If you were able to get this and you get to the point, something to keep in mind that's always fun to do is, you know, you can run the target acquired amalgam that you get from the Ropalopolis, whatever you call it. It's really good. It's why it's my most used. To sort of showcase that, like, you know, I got this as my most used because I was using it with a Sefun Nikana Zaw. And let's just say I've been playing a lot more Excalibur Umbra. This Excalibur build I played some of, I haven't played a lot of, but I had pretty much zero usage before testing this build out on Excalibur. Since when I first started playing Excalibur, I jumped right into running Prime since I switched to him back in the beta. So without further complications and delaying things, I will show this build in action. If you had to choose a school, Poise for this specifically. That's for Umbra as well if you don't have Prime Sure-Footed. So before we get any more distracted on that, I will preface, and this is sort of the only hard part about showing this accurately to a brand new MR2 player. I can't not have Operator. I don't know of any way of me just toggling off Operator so that I can show you, hey, this is without Operator with all this other stuff that you get from going through the quest line within the game. So I can't show that. Just keep that in mind. So when you get a focus school, I would highly recommend going with Unaru off the start, because it's the most useful baseline out of all of them, in my opinion. So show this, transfer in. You can transfer out, transfer back in just by doing a quick melee. So I'll show this cool feature. So the important thing about Brief Respite in this context is that, and this is where I kind of have to use Operator since I'm running out of energy here, because we've unfortunately not gotten an energy orb from this. So once I get some energy, I can show you. The primary goal of this, and trying to show you before I pull out Exalted Blade. There you go. Yeah, the downside not having a companion, you don't get the pickups. So just showing this build, Steel Path, Exalted Blade's very powerful, and if you needed to, you can either with Brief Respite equipped, you can either slash dash, and the primary reason why that's so powerful is because every time you cast slash dash when you have Brief Respite, you get a certain amount of shields, and you're able to then subsequently regenerate your shields while you're slash dashing. And you can see how powerful that is. And we're not even running Archon Shards, we're not running a Subsume, we're running no Prime mods. Once you actually pull out Exalted Blade and you're not trying to demonstrate how Dex Nikana works, that's a huge difference. So we even talk about demonstrating, if you're trying to just play normal, we talk about, let's say, skill difference or just understanding of the game difference. Right here is, I'm primarily just using slash dash as a defensive ability because it is in fact a defensive ability. Get some energy from that. So if I were to talk about some key aspects, kind of like what I alluded to, and I'll demonstrate them here. So slash dashing for survivability with the combination of Brief Respite or some sort of way to convert energy to shields through auger mods. I like to use both in this because you don't have any sort of negative efficiency relative to 100, which makes it a little bit harder for you to be able to do that when you get higher up, but on base Steel Path it's fine. So that's kind of one requirement. If you at least do influence, and let's say you're doing chromatic influence, very easy for you to mod that together, even on a base Excalibur. Just buying your arcane slot for your Exalted Blade, that sort of thing, then you can see how powerful this is. You can, for the most part, as long as the enemy doesn't see you, you're immortal because you can hit them through the walls. So if you really wanted to do that, you could just sit back and do that. So let's say you've got Brief Respite, you've got Chromatic Blade, you've got Melee Influence, and a decent amount of mods. Some sort of way to regenerate energy. Arcane Energize is very easy to get now. It's been beaten to death with how many events people are able to get fully ranked Energize with. So far less of an issue as it was 5 years ago, or however long it was, where it was like over 2,000 platinum for you to get a maxed out Energize. You can just see how easy this is. I'm not even using Companion. The Companion would help me maintain my energy economy, but just for having Vacuum. But you don't even need that. If you aren't using a subsume, and so you have radial blind or radial howl, it is a very effective way of shield gating, let's just say. And I don't use shield gating in the way that most people do it. You don't really need to fully max out your shields in order to use its like slight immunity period, as you can see here. In the case of this, it's helping build stacks of adaptation, which is enough for you to not have anything other than adaptation and slash dash and free for spite. So this is the easiest way I've thought to be able to demonstrate this this behavior. Oh, and that's an unfortunate nature of when I run out of energy. When you do get operator, and I didn't want to show this, but you could do this. When you're running Unaru and you have enough of it leveled up, you can just try to kill it with operator. And I didn't want to try to do that, though. I didn't want to use operator at all for that. Just so you can kind of see potentially what you might be running into. Acolytes aren't the easiest thing to kill, depending on which one you get. So, it is what it is. But I think that's sufficient demonstration for that. We'll back out and do another run. And I'll just show straight up going right into Exalted Blade. Oh, the other thing I can't sort out is, you know, a new player isn't going to know enough about, or isn't going to know everything about the mobility mechanics, about all the little niche things, so just take that kind of with a grain of salt. Obviously, a new player can't take this build to Steel Path and be able to succeed for it, but they're not going to have the knowledge of melee mechanics, of mobility mechanics, and that sort of stuff. So just keep that in mind. I guess what I'll do here is, if you were to buy one pet, one companion, you'd probably buy a Nautilus because it's very cheap. And what we'll do is we'll give it the one mod that matters. There we go. And let's say you get this as well. That's kind of nice to have. So we'll just go with that. And then on the modding side, this is my regular vertiglass, so I don't care what it has anymore. Let's go unmodded. I'll show that, because more than likely, if you're a newer player, you might not know this, but Nautilus is a very easy thing to get. 75 platinum, you can buy it from the store. It's usually cheaper on the store. That comes with a catalyst and a reactor built right into both of its actual Sentinel and the weapon. So we'll use that as a control. Go back in there and show you that. I use this mission just as a control. It's where I test all my builds for, or all my builds at.
Accept your death, and you may yet avoid it. Trust in your training.
Any new players watching this, one of the powerful things to do in this game in general is if you're running melee only, you can use stance mobility mechanics in order to kind of speed things up here. So I do it right there. You have the block forward neutral, and it works great. To help you give a little bit more mobility, even on Exalted Blade, which doesn't have the best. Like here, I roll after I do a heavy attack. Helps break that that animation. The other powerful thing is right here, where I'm aim gliding while I'm attacking, which you move faster aim gliding while attacking than when you're, let's say, on the ground doing this. So just as a point of reference, like that right there versus that. Just moving a lot faster. I use slash dash as a mobility ability all the time. It's not only a very powerful mobility ability, but it's also a powerful defensive and offensive ability. It's overall Excalibur's best ability. I wouldn't call Exalted Blade his best ability. Although you do need it, you can't subsume it off and have slash dash do any damage. So, With a prerequisite. It's the best ability. So just showing how much easier this already is. Pulling out Exalted Blade right away. And just having a Sentinel.
I've delivered a life support capsule to the area. Activating it will buy you more time.
On builds like this, you do kind of want to slash dash often. That's just because of the fact that you want to get the immunity periods from slash dash, and it's another way that you can regenerate shields. You sort of are managing your energy economy actively when you're playing builds like this, because there is a reliance on Brief Respite. If you want to find out how difficult things are on a build like this, without Brief Respite, feel free to be my guest. I've hoped that it wasn't required, but it simply is until there's some sort of change.
Prepare for life support.
This really is a testament to how powerful Exalted Blade and Slash Dash are post Tekra Encore. Base Excalibur, no Prime mods, no Archon shards, no Subsume, one augment. You could probably run this with no augments, but it doesn't sound like fun. And if you don't have any Prime mods available, I don't see why we'd make an arbitrary no augment requirement. We're already making a pretty limiting modding requirement, not using Prime mods. One thing I do as well is I break a lot of slash dashes by meleeing. I go over my keybinds. If you are a newer player that hasn't seen my other videos, I do reference this quite a lot, but I use the melee overrides melee input toggle that you have in your keybinds, and that does let you just use the left mouse button, right mouse button, like any other weapon with your melee, and it's a huge quality of life rather than using E or F, whatever the default keybind is. I don't know anymore. Instead of using that, you can just use left and right mouse button and not destroy your index, your index finger. Or I guess your thumb if you're on a controller. One thing you want to try to avoid is, and it's hard to show this without messing it up, but you're avoiding sliding, because you don't want to do this, where you do the radial or the slide blind, whatever you want to call it. There's a couple reasons. It's not very good. Like, it doesn't really do much in comparison to just radial blind. The range isn't as good, but then also, and this is one of the big parts of it, it doesn't proc things like Brief Respite. It's not considered an ability, so it doesn't generate shields when it's casted. Let's see if we can actually kill this guy this time. Oh no, I got knocked down. And right there, I was spamming slash dash, hoping I had enough energy to do it, because you get that little bit of shields, and that little bit of shields is just enough for you to survive. Really don't have to full send into shield gating in order to make it effective, even at level cap. So 800 some kills. I'd say that's 800 some kills in 6 minutes. I'd say that's pretty good for a no Prime mod, base Excalibur with no Subsume, with no Archon shards. If I really wanted to send this to the moon, I might I don't really see the point of it, but put full Archon shards on it, give it a subsume, no Prime mods, or fully kit out Excalibur. Maybe I'll make a second one and do that. Make it triple Umbra form of him, just for the memes. So I think that's a good demonstration of how little you actually need to make Excalibur work. Even base Excalibur with no Prime mods, with no subsume, no Archon shards, in Steel Path, which if you're in Steel Path, you have Umbra, so just run Umbra. So don't try to run this build if you have Steel Path unlocked, because you should have Umbra at that point, and then you might as well run some sort of degraded form of this. Like if you had to eliminate stuff, like not running Prime mods here and then Archon shards, you know, anything extrapolated from that, higher than that, is going to work in Steel Path. So without this, you could probably not even run Arcanes on if you had triple Umbral mods. Even if these weren't maxed out, you're still going to do fine. It really is a testament to how powerful Excalibur is. Whether that's just melee or just playing him with guns and then just having Exalted Blade in the background, or even just slash dashing. So yeah, if there's any questions about that, if have any input on it, on how effective a non-prime build can be, just a full non-prime, that's why I've called it non-prime. No prime mods, no subsume, pretty cheap mods that you can get fully maxed out, MR2, like 2 or 3 days worth of trades. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And yeah, so if you have any questions about that, feel free to comment below. If you have any suggestions, have any more ideas, anything for me to test, kind of running low on them until there's some sort of changes. I've kind of really narrowed down the maximum Excalibur setup for all three of them now, all 3 tiers of it. Yeah, thanks.